Let me try and tie all of this together with the most potent story that comes to us out of the historical pages of the world missionary movement. I've told you Jonah was out of touch with his surroundings, that he was out of touch with his message, and the only thing he was in touch with was his own comfort. Let me now set in contrast a man who was exactly the opposite. I take you into the heart of David Livingstone, a man who made an incredible impact on my own life by just reading his biography many times. David Livingstone was born in Blantyre, Scotland in 1813. He sat on his father's knee, who told him stories of the famed Dutch-German missionary Karl Gutzlaff. And Livingstone at an early age made a commitment and said, Lord, send me where you want me to go. Make me that kind of a missionary. When he was only 9 years old, David Livingstone had memorized the entire 119th Psalm, all 176 verses of it, to recognize the primacy of God's word in his own heart. He was a student of Latin before he began his teens, a student of the scriptures, and tried to just make it like a fire within his bones. As a young man, he stood outside a cluster of African villages where he saw the smoke spiraling upwards. And in his journal, he enters these words. He says, the haunting specter of the smoke of 1,000 villages has burned itself within my heart. And then he got on his knees and he wrote these words, send me anywhere, only go with me. Lay any burden on me, only sustain me. Sever any ties but the ties that bind me to your service and to your heart. He said, through it all, the words of Christ came to me. Lo, I'm with you always, even unto the end of the age. He married Mary Moffat of the famed Moffat missionary family, and the poor woman was to suffer want and deprivation for many years because of the torrid conditions under which David and she were living. They lost some of their children. She completely lost her health and finally said, David, I need to go back to recuperate my strength or I won't live much longer. He understood. He loved her dearly and they bid each other goodbye. She came back to her homeland, and as they tried to exchange letters which would take months to cross, she was going to set eyes upon her husband again, not after 1 month, not after 2 months, not after 1 year, not after 2 years, but 5 years had gone by when David Livingstone set foot on home territory again. He wrapped his arms around his wife, and then she put him away for just a moment to take a good look at him. She couldn't recognize him. His face had been burned to a crisp and leather-like appearance under the sun for which his body was not prepared. She looked at one of his eyes as he had walked into the branch of a tree and blinded him in one eye. She saw his shoulder, which had been torn apart by a lion, and he walked with an awkward gait, and her own eyes welled up with tears. But members of the royal family wanted to meet him. Professors wanted to meet him. Medical people wanted to meet him because he was such a pioneer breaking new ground. Finally, he looked at his wife, Mary, and said, sweetheart, the haunting specter of the smoke of 1,000 villages and the morning sun is still burning within my heart. She said, David, I think you should go and you should minister there. Please give me a little longer till I get well and I will join you. And they understood and accepted it. And he went. A long while later, she joined him. The very day she set foot on that soil, she contracted that disease again. A short span after that, he was going to be burying her. And an eyewitness said, as he lowered her body into the ground, they saw him kneel and mutter these words, my Jesus, my King, my life, my all. I again consecrate my life to thee. I shall place no value in anything I possess or in anything I do, except in relation to thy kingdom and to thy service. He said, the words of Christ came to me. Lo, I'm with you always, even unto the end of the age. He went back to his hometown of Ujiji, found out somebody had played a cruel joke and stolen his medication as his own body was racked in pain. He got on his knees in one of those rare moments for self-preservation, said, you promised you'd be with me to the end of the age, my Lord. I need that medicine. And as he prayed, he heard footsteps closing in upon him. And as he looked at those feet and followed the countenance, for the first time he was looking into the face of a white man, a stranger. He said, who are you, sir? He said, my name is Henry M. Stanley. He said, Mr. Livingston, I presume, he said those famous words. He said, are you Miss Livingston? He said, yes. He said, let me tell you two things about me. Number one, I'm the biggest swaggering atheist on the face of the earth. Please don't try to convert me. Newspapers in America have sent me to try and do a story on your life. Number two, he said, somebody has sent some medication for you. Livingston says, give me the medication, please. 4 months later, the biggest swaggering atheist on the face of the earth bent his knee on African soil and gave his life to Christ. The best biography you will read of Livingston is written by Henry M. Stanley, 2 volumes called Livingston of Africa. I sat in David Livingston's home in Blantyre and followed the story by pictures. And that enormous painting of Stanley bidding him goodbye, pleading with him to come back because he was too sick to carry on. But Livingston, content to be with the people he so dearly loved, he remained on. Shortly thereafter, his closest African friend by the name of Chuma, along with one of his friends, used to carry him by stretcher from village to village. One day he turned to Chuma, his beloved friend, and said, take me back home. I am too weary. I am too sick. They brought him into his home and were about to spill him onto his cot when he said, no, please help me onto my knees. And he got down on his knees and started to pray. They left him alone. His prayers were so intense, so meaningful, so personal. They stood outside, looked in a little while later, and a little later, and a little later. He was still on his knees. Chuma said he needs to sleep more than he needs to continue praying. They walked in, and Chuma took him by the shoulder and said, Bwana, Livingston fell over. He was dead. He died exactly the way he tried to live, in touch with his surroundings, in touch with his message, out of touch with his own comfort. Chuma carried Livingston's body 1,500 miles by foot for 9 months to send him back to England, but not before he took his heart out of Livingston's body and buried it under a tree in Africa, because that's where his heart really was. I don't know where you're at, friend. I know where I'm at. A long way from Livingston's quality. But you can make a first step. Are you willing to pray a prayer as meaningfully as you've ever prayed? To believe that the problem out there is not moral, it's spiritual. To believe that if you got in touch with the heart of God, there's a wideness in His mercy that can change the most resistant. And to believe that if you're willing to give up some of your own comforts, God is willing to use you in some of the toughest spots of the world. Can I tell you something, and then I'll be through? 2 weeks ago, a man came to me in the city of Amman in Jordan, where I just finished preaching. He wrapped his arms around me and wouldn't let go. In the Middle East, they really hug you. When I finally asked for breathing room, you know what he said? Please hear me. My colleague was standing with me there. He said, I don't know what I was preaching on that. I wasn't preaching on this. He said, I am from Nineveh, where exists the oldest evangelical church. Would you come and preach in Nineveh for us? And as I backed off, he said, you can be the next Jonah. I said, no, I don't want to be the next Jonah, but I have no doubt if we come, I said, God will give us a whale of a time, so we'll consider it and get in there. Today, if you go to Nineveh, they commemorate the visit of Jonah nearly 3,000 years ago. God used him, and he said, you're concerned about a plant, I'm concerned about a people who don't know the difference between the right hand and their left. Should I not be concerned about them? Will you bow your heads with me in prayer, please? As your heads are bowed, I'd like to repeat for you a hymn by Charles Wesley that I have taken into my own heart. I want you to listen to it and see if that would echo a commitment from you today. Wesley says this, O thou who camest from above, the pure celestial fire to impart, kindle a flame of sacred love on the mean altar of my heart. There let it for thy glory burn with inextinguishable blaze, and trembling to its source return in humble prayer and fervent praise. Jesus, confirm my heart's desire to work and speak and think for thee. Still let me guard the holy fire, and still stir up thy gift in me. Ready for all thy perfect will, my acts of faith and love repeat, till death thy endless mercy seal, and make my sacrifice complete. Would you pray that today with a simple one-liner, send me anywhere, only go with me. My dear friend, God can make a difference in you and make a difference in the world if you will honestly get in touch with his message and out of touch with your own comfort. I pray that many of you this morning will say, here am I, Lord, send me. May God bless you.